So I started to record. I got 4 minutes into what I was saying and realized I am not plugged up with my headphones, so people cannot hear me. But welcome. We are talking about Jazz today by Toni Morrison, and I'm happy to have you guys with me to talk about this book, which is both profound and very important. I think so. Um, I I was going to say that I met Jazz, but I did. That is not accurate. I knew about Jazz when, like for years, I've known that this book exists. But I was assigned this book by my friend Sean Campbell, who picked this book for us to read and to talk about on Books with Friends. And when he did it, my heart was like, oh gosh, no, not Toni Morrison. I love Toni Morrison. I support her always. I buy all her books, so I had Jazz. But did not think I was a fan of her writing. Let's just say I tried reading. I think it was either Beloved or Paradise years ago, and set it down and was like, "This is not for me." And I have not picked up a Toni Morrison book since. Um, so, but I'm a good student. So if you assign me something to do, I am going to do it. So I was like, okay, fine. It's his favorite book, and so I'm like, I will read Jazz. And I'm so thankful and grateful that Sean brought Toni Morrison into my life, especially in the season that I am in my life. It's been such a gift, and I really enjoyed this story. So I am referencing a conversation that I had with Sean about it. I will put it in the show notes below if you want to check that out. It is a Book with Friends episode. It's a new thing that I've been doing, where I literally talk about a book with a friend. And that conversation that we had is very much like Jazz. It is improvisational. It is us kind of running and talking with and through each other. It was such a fun conversation, and I am happy that Sean is returning to talk about the first book in this trilogy. Is what it is Beloved. So this is book number one. Then comes Jazz, and lastly, which I don't have around me, it's somewhere in my house, is Paradise. So I am sure we are going to read through this whole trilogy, and I'm excited to go on the journey. And so with books that really, wrong book, not Beloved, not yet. We'll get to you later. But with books that really kind of stand out to me or speak to me or kind of lead me in a way, I like to share my book notes with you guys, which just is kind of like my notes and thoughts that I have about a book along the way. And it's kind of like a record of my reading and a record of my thinking, and how a book is making me feel. And I've talked about why I don't rate books like 5 stars or 2 stars. I believe that also, if you want to check out why I don't do that, in my show notes below. But today, I'm really excited to just share with you my thoughts around Jazz. So the first word that came to mind when I closed this book, it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday morning, and I was reading it. I was so into it, and I was like, I cannot move out of my bed until I finish this book. And that means I might be late for church. So I was like really wanting to finish this book. And the first word that came to my mind was wow. And I knew that I needed time to process everything that I had read, this world that I had been swept into, and I still need time to process. So I'm still thinking about this book, and I think that that's a sign of a really good work of fiction when you're left like that. So Jazz is again the second in the Beloved trilogy. It was written in 1992. It is classified as historical fiction as it's set in the 1920s, 1926, I think to be exact, in Harlem, New York. I'm gonna put this down because I need to open up my book notes, so you'll see me looking down and referencing. And it is also, though, you guys, um, a psychological fiction. That's also how I would categorize this book as well. Um, there's so many interesting things, and I think very unique things about this work. And I want to center my time with you guys speaking on a few of them. So one, I just am going to set the frame. I'm not spoiling anything here when I set the frame of the story, but just so that you can kind of orient yourself. This is a story about a couple, and it's a love story about a couple, Violet and her husband Joe. They've been married for 20 years, which resonates with me in this season because I am celebrating, or will be celebrating, 21 years of marriage to my husband, my love, October 23rd. And it was really interesting reading, and being inside of a marriage 20 years in, and having that view of when they started and their journey and when they are, or how they arrived when we meet them as a couple in their 40s. And this couple has been through a lot. They have experienced some hard things in their course of their marriage. And when we meet them, the husband is or has been involved in an affair, with a much younger girl named Dorcas, and he killed her. Yes, this is how the story starts, you guys. So again, I'm not giving anything away. He shoots her, and at her funeral, the wife, Violet, goes to her funeral and attempts to slash her face. Welcome to jazz. Welcome to jazz. So the story is written and it goes back and forth in time, so that we get to kind of see and have an understanding of who these people are and who they are in relationship to where they come from and who their people is. And so, one of the things that's very prominent, um, in this story is the lineage of the Great Migration. And so, some parts of the story go back to Plantation South, to escaping Plantation South, and what ultimately led this couple to leave their home in the South and to move to the city and to make life in the city and what the city means to them. And so, in this way, you have this woven, kind of a patchwork, that weaves together the telling of not just like an individual couple, but there's so much synergy and similarity within the lived experience of people, African Americans, who made that migration from the South into the North. And so, there are parts that were totally familiar to me and accessible to me. But there were other parts that were very new and different, and things that I didn't think about, or in such details did I think about those things. So, we we have um, we have Violet and we have Joe, and they are in the city and they are making a new life in the city. And one of the things that I really loved about this book is that the city is a character in and of itself. It is this larger in life place that is both beautiful and energetic, but it's also large and looming and unpredictable. And sometimes it's unfriendly and sometimes it's a safe haven. And it really does kind of take on an identity of its own. One of the most, I think, telling things about this work and distinguishing things about this work is the very structure that Toni writes, that Toni has situated jazz in. And so, although the word jazz is never mentioned anywhere in within the story, it does tell us in the title, it gives us the readers a really good clue as to how the story will feel, right? The skeleton of the story, which is alive and acting, and that is of the musical form of jazz, which actually came out of and created and came out of the Black experience. And I want to read a quote to you guys about her thinking about this, because it sticks with me, and it's so, I think, I was going to say inspiring, but it's not inspiring. It's so necessary, I think is the word that I'm trying to look for. When she was asked like why she used jazz, why it was such a muse, and not just a muse, but a template, really. Her answer was, I was struck by the modernity that jazz anticipated and directed, and by its unreasonable optimism. And I love that, unreasonable optimism. Whatever the truth or consequences of individual entanglements and the racial landscape, the music insisted that the past might haunt us, but it would not entrap us. It demanded a future and refused to regard the past as an absurd and abused record with no choice but to repeat itself at the crack, and no power on earth could lift the arm that held the needle. And so, everything about the structure, from the run on sentences that are not stopped when they should be by the correct punctuation, to the ways in which we flip back and forth, to the different voices kind of overlapping and speaking into things, it's all jazz and it's all improvisation. And it's so beautiful and it's wonderful to get lost into. And it really does I think for me and my experience, you get lost in the rhythm and in the music of the words that craft this story. And it's just absolutely, it's really brilliant. Um, the other thing I think that really kind of demonstrates jazz is the contrasting notes, because in the music of jazz, you have these contrasting notes. And in the contrasting, in the sense that this isn't making sense with this, or this character that is has this belief system, we see that character go against their own belief system and do something that is outside of what they deem they should do, or believe to do, or held to do. And that makes it keeps it so human, so human. And an example of this is Dorcas, the young lady who actually is dies in this one, that had an affair with Joe. She lives and is being taken care of by her aunt. And her aunt is very religious. Her aunt has all of these values and a strong moral code. And she's kind of the one in the book that, has the gaze down and is very quick to say what's right and what's wrong and what people should do and shouldn't do. And she is really burdened with the responsibility of raising Dorcas correctly. And it is this woman that, after Dorcas's funeral, Violet begins to develop a relationship with. I don't know if we'd call it a friendship, but it's some sort of ship. And it says that the woman who avoided the streets let her, Violet, into her living room, the woman who sat down in the middle of one. And that quote just speaks to these contrasting notes, that the same woman who avoided the streets, who looked down on people who did certain things and did certain behaviors, and definitely had a right to look down on Violet, who, tried to disfigure her dead niece. This woman who had all of these opinions and who, treated people and things in a very kind of arm distance way. It's the same woman who allowed, you know, such distastefulness into her living room. And again, these contrasting notes. And aren't we all filled with these contrasting notes? Another way in which kind of the structure is like jazz to me is that there are no chapters like chapter 1, chapter 2 in this book. It's movements. It's like one long, piece, but then you have movements, and within these movements, different instruments are kind of have their solo or their moment, right? And that's to me how the structure is. There are movements, and so different characters come to the front and they have their moment, and we learn more about them in that way. So, in addition to the structure of jazz, and reading it, not being able to predict, it's not a predictable story. Jazz is not predictable in the way that it goes. If you're listening to live jazz, even if you're like, oh, it's my favorite piece, I love that piece, it's not going to be done the same way. That is the nature of jazz. But in addition to that, the other thing that really struck me is the mystery of marriage, which to me, marriage is a wholly mysterious thing. And this concept of being able to uh, see and experience and dealing with yourself as individuals and as a couple, and understanding the things that threaten that individual regard of oneself and love and nurture of oneself, and that which threatens you as a couple. And this, and how something that can be so devastatingly broken can also be beautifully repaired. Again, contrasting notes. And so I'm not going to give away the story to you guys, but uh, one of the things that I liked the most was reading through this uncomfortable and at times unjust relationship and love story that wasn't your typical love story. And I really appreciate that. That's all I'm going to say about that part. Lastly, I want to say before I wrap up, just the narrator. I think for me, the narrator is the character that is still holding my attention. The narrator is omniscient and thus all-knowing, thus certain, and thus trustworthy. If we go down this thought process of a reliable narrator, but the narrator discovers that what I thought I was certain about, what I thought I knew, what I thought I understood, to be able to communicate it with such certainty, I don't. And this narrator has taught me a lot about myself and has me in my life as I'm moving through my life, paying more attention to what I feel like I am very certain about, what I know for sure. And it's a warning. She warns me, this narrator, that is genderless in this book, by the way, but I just experience her as a she. She warns me to not lead my life with such certainty, but to actually lead with curiosity. And that is, and the way in which it is done is really, 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 really unique. And so that is a gift that this book it has given me, and it's something that I am thinking about, because how often do we think like we know everything about, this person, that situation, and then the knowing, it stops our ability to empathize and to show human care and concern and to have hope, right? All these things are affected with our certainty, especially if we feel as though this is certainly done, or there's certainly no hope, or there's certainly, you know, no future. They're certainly bad, right? Um, there's certainly no good. Um, when we have that level of certainty, other things stop within us. And in reading this book and following the line of the narrator, it's so easy to see how that happened to the narrator, and the damage that it does. But because the narrator is so sharing with us, right? And like we're their person, right? The narrator's person speaking directly to us. We also are able to benefit from seeing the thinking and the like dawning of the, oh, wait a second. I had it all wrong. I had it all wrong. And the humility to even admit that I had it all wrong. That is sticking with me in this book. Toni Morrison passed away in 2019, but she left such a wealth of treasure for us. And I'm really, I think, at a good time in my life to really sit and unpack these treasures that she left in a season of my life. And I'm really looking forward to reading Beloved and going back and reading Beloved. My friend told me that these books can stand on their own, but that it is really, encouraged to experience them as a trio that they are and how they are intended. So if you have read Beloved, please, I would love to know what your thoughts are, especially about the structure of Jazz itself and the narrator. And I'm also curious to know like what characters struck out to you the most, and any other thoughts that you want to share about Jazz. And if you have also read Beloved, please don't tell me about Beloved yet, guys. Do not spoil it for me. I'm not going to spoil it for you. But I do want to share with you when I'm going to be having the next conversation with Sean about Beloved, so you can tune in live. My Books with Friends are live conversations, and so we would love to have you join us live for those. But if you can't make the live one, you can always come back to the channel and listen to it. So again, Beloved, be on the lookout for that. If you haven't seen the conversation about Jazz, do yourself a favor and check it out. So those two. Thank you guys so much for spending this time and just letting me kind of work through my thoughts. As you guys can see, I'm still working through these thoughts. And I want you to take care of yourself, visit a local bookstore, find a treasure of a book, even, just find a book, pick up a book, bring a book home, make time for reading. It is medicine, especially in the times that we are in right now. Reading is medicinal. Reading is medicinal. And so you all know what to do. Treat yourself wonderful and always stay reading. Bye.